the cap space is increased almost every year. Actually, the salary cap typically goes up year after year.
Yeah, but it's pretty incremental. I'm asking, like, do you think there's ever going to be a major jump in cap space so
Well,
teams can afford, to keep more players happy?
from what I've heard is that because of the COVID year and revenue being down, the cap might go down this year because there's going to be a new CBA, I think, coming up this year or something. But to answer your question, I don't know because it's true that the cap space generally has been increasing every year. But I think the quarterback value is rising faster. But and what I can see happening is because I feel like it used to be not that long ago where it was two, maybe three quarterbacks a year, and like that was like at the most people would be excited about coming into the league. And now there are, there's possibility that there might be five quarterbacks taken in the first round this coming year, and there were five that were taken in 2018, and there was the big three that we all remember from last year: Burrow, Herbert, and Tua. What I can see happening is like a lot of talent going to waste, honestly, because um, the actual talent coming in from college football has never been better, and like receivers have never been more abundant. So many pass rushers have never been more abundant that are coming into the league, and some of them are busts. What I'm surprised is like a secondary league hasn't been successful of late, like a European league, or they had
XFL.
the XFL, um, the what was the other one? Start with an A. That was there for a
Oh, the
while.
AFL.
Yeah. Well, was that what it was called?
I think you
No,
didn't fall. No.
it was like the
Yeah,
AAF or something. I AFL.
maybe. Well, that's the old. It was the AFL
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
NFL. Yeah.
back in the day. I'm just surprised, like with the the exuberant amount of talent that's coming out of college football, that there could be like another league somewhere that hasn't been successful yet. I find that strange,
Oh, you
given
mean
given
just
the caps.
because enough players, there's not enough space in the NFL for all these players. Therefore,
Yeah,
there's another
and
league
there's
that.
not enough cap for them either, and
Mm,
so
I see what you
they
mean.
could be making more. They come out and they're talented enough to play in the NFL. There's just not enough room for them. So what
Mm-hmm.
I'm really surprised is that there's not that none of those leagues have been successful because I feel like a lot of people want to watch them. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's the
Yeah.
NFL trying to drown them out or something, but I mean,
I
I like the NBA is thriving on other leagues, the G League, the European League, all sorts of foreign leagues, and the NFL is like we stick to college football. That's our only development league that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty true. Yeah, I mean, I wonder about that as well. I wonder if I wouldn't be surprised if lots of those players you're talking about like prefer to be on the practice squad of an NFL team than go to the, play in Canada or,
Yeah,
or XFL or something like that. I mean,
I think
that's the only.
I think that's a really good point that both of you guys make, and you know, you know, looking at it in a more broader sense, long term, the NFL could expand. They could have expansion teams, and a lot like the NBA has Toronto, a Canadian team. Obviously, Canada has its own basketball leagues, but they're absolute trash. Kind of like Canada has its own football league, and it's absolute trash. But Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, those cities. I bet if you even took all the best talent from the Canadian Football League and put it all in one team, and then gave it a little bit of juice from college and draft and stuff, it would be a serviceable football team. Obviously, that would screw up with schedules. Things would have to change, divisions. It's almost like, well, one thing I like about the MLS, because I obviously am a Sounders fan and I follow the MLS, they have one or two expansion teams a year at this point. And it's because, 10 years ago, there were only like 14 teams in the league, which is very, very few. But what they do is every year there's one or two expansion teams, and those teams are given certain picks in the draft. It just goes to the new expansion teams. And they're also, they kind of get like first pick on free agents to a certain degree every year. And it's just something that, it's not like a surprise, like, hey, surprise, this year expansion teams get first pick on free agents. It's more, every year that they're adding teams, everyone expects it. They work around it, and it works really well because it makes it so those teams don't come into the league and they're just absolute trash. I mean, Nashville got a team last year and they made it to the playoffs this year. Minnesota, same thing, made it to the Western Conference Championship this year, and they're just 2 or 3 years old. So I can see the NFL doing an expansion, but it's also like, I don't know, the only country I can think of that likes American football enough would probably be England, just because we already have games there every season. But it's just like, is there enough to support another league? Like, what would you guys rather see, expansion teams or an alternate league, whether it's in the U.S. or in Europe?
To be honest, I think there's, and this is probably the reason why it hasn't happened, I think there's significant barriers to both that are a little bit unique to the NFL. For one, an expansion team, aside from the fact that I think there is a sizable amount of pushback to that idea, both from fans of the league and from ownership, because a lot of people really like where the NFL is at and has been for nearly 2 decades, or I think just about 2 decades is when the Texans were added. And a perfect 32 teams. Everyone really liked the playoff structure. That being said, this is the first year in a long time where we've seen a significant change to the playoffs, so that could be a precursor to that. But on the other end, with ownership, there's things in the NFL such as revenue sharing between the teams and other things that as well probably add a pretty sizable barrier to adding a whole nother team, unless it proved a huge addition to their revenue increasing. So I don't know. I agree with you. If there were an expansion team, UK feels like it. It could be Canada as well. I think both of those are markets that have at least enough interest. I mean, I know that besides the UK, Mexico is usually the go-to foreign game. I think, I don't know, it just kind of feels like that's less likely, though, just for, I don't know, just, I guess, market change of culture, whatever you would say about that. But I don't know. I don't see anything happening immediately. I know the NFL says they're very interested in expanding to foreign markets, to foreign places, but I don't see it happening anytime in the next 5 years as far as a new team. And an expansion league, I just don't know if there's enough interest in these markets for an entire league is the issue with that.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think an expansion team is more likely than a league. But think about it. If the UK got an NFL team, every NFL fan in the UK would become a fan of that team. So it would really probably be one of the most popular teams in the NFL, numbers-wise on a fan base, which would add a considerable amount of, league revenue. And same with Canada. I mean, they have their own league, but they, it's kind of like they know the NFL is better. There's more skill in it. Most of them watch the NFL rather than the Canadian Football League. If Canada and one of their bordering cities got an NFL team, so many Canadian football fans would just become a fan of that team and buy their jerseys, go to their games, pay attention. I think that's what would happen, and it would just have to be at that level. Same thing 5 or 10 years from now, where it would just increase, revenue share, overall revenue. It would just have to work out mathematically. But I think Austin's right. First off, there's so much wasted talent. But second off, there's just the league's going to grow. The population's going to grow. money is going to inflate. It would just make sense that there's an expansion of some sort at some point.
Yeah, I think I mean expansion's possible, but yeah, I agree with Parker that it's probably a ways away. But the difference between the NFL and the MLS is the MLS is a lot younger, and when the NFL was a young league, I mean, in the
Yeah.
70s we saw a ton of expansion teams. In the 90s there were two, three expansion. Well, I mean technically three, and then 2002 came and then they balanced out the league and all that. And I think it's just now like the NFL is more a mature league and it's set in its ways, and the money pool is way bigger. There's a lot more money in the NFL right now than the MLS, and so the MLS has a lot more flexibility to figure out what it is right now
Mm-hmm.
before because it's not as established in the United States as the NFL is. And I think it's more likely that a European league would happen because it's already existed, and it was pretty successful. There were I think there were like 8 teams in the European League, and Kurt Warner played in it, and lots of there was talented people that played in it, and I don't think like the NFL has to worry about those leagues beating it because the AFL ended up not beating it and ended up just joining it. The USFL was around for a while. Steve Young played in it. Warren Moon played in it. Reggie White played in it. It was really successful. The only thing was that the USFL didn't manage money very well, and it collapsed money-wise, and so it stopped existing. But all the NFL needs is just to have just something on the side that they know could never beat it,
Mm-hmm.
and so that they can keep an eye on talent that they otherwise probably would miss.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's more likely and the better option for the NFL is to have some sort of other supplemental league where these players that played in college and weren't paid, but they're definitely talented enough to play in the NFL. They just weren't put in the right situation at first, could thrive and show their stuff to kind of reignite their careers. I think that's the best option for the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just complicated because in the end, these leagues are businesses, and there's like a reason that the Raiders went from Oakland to Las Vegas. It's because there's a lack of fans in Oakland. There's a lack of monetary support. Was the major reason for that, and same with like St. Louis going to LA. It was bought and sold for a profit kind of thing. So you couldn't just expand and be like, oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of some city that doesn't have an NFL team in the U.S. It's not like, oh, Oakland's gonna have an NFL team again, kind of thing.
Right.
So it would have to be something out of country at this point, I think.
Yeah, I can see that. And I mean, if they want to make it more global, Europe's the place. And they had a league there. And I don't know why it's not there anymore because it was doing actually pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, Europe would be the place, I think, if they were to do that.
Yeah, because the thing with like basketball has so many leagues that work. It's because the teams are 5 people and they're not absolutely destroyed week in, week out like football. Football, it's such a large organization, and recovery time and injuries, it's so different, which is why it doesn't work. But yeah, I think the problem with it being overseas in Europe is if it's really looked at or treated as a development league for the NFL, it's so far away. There's such a distance. Obviously it's possible it's done in soccer, but it's hard to keep a close eye on things.
Yeah, NFL, luckily they got oodles of money. They can get by with the plane tickets. I don't know. I definitely, for myself, I find myself more in that camp of people where like I actually really like the NFL as it is.
I do too. Like, I'm not saying we need one, but
I mean, I actually was not for the playoff changes when I heard they were expanding it to 7 teams this year, and I think eventually it'll be 8 teams. And then they also approved the expansion of the regular season, right? One more regular season game, not starting this year, but I think it's next year. I'd have to check that out. I mean, getting more games is cool, but to me, I really felt like everything was good. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me being not wanting to change. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm sure things would be great if they found a way to do it. Although it's hard to think. I mean, two conferences, 4 divisions each, 4 teams in each division. You throw 2 teams in there, you're like, what the freak are we gonna do? You know, like.
I know. There's so many people already complaining. It's unfair. The only the a winning team or a team that has a losing record shouldn't win the division, make the playoffs. But if you expand it to 8, they're gonna make the playoffs anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So to 8 teams per conference, and I think like NFL fans or just any sports fans in general, their memories are so short. It's like, I mean, the league pre-2002 was a mess division-wise. It was crazy. Like the Falcons played in the NFC West. Like, so, and yeah, I like the league the way it is. I can see, there's just so much quarterback talent, but there's only 32 starting spots. And so it gets to a point where once everyone's found their quarterback, which, there's some organizations that think it's the quarterback the problem, but it's not. But that is just, it's just going to leave a lot of really talented players that could have made millions not making millions because there's not enough room for them.
That's true. It's true. And coming back to that, the salary cap question that Thomas posed, this isn't directly related to that, but another thing that was brought up in this last collective bargaining agreement talk that players want but hasn't happened yet is, as far as, quarterbacks and stuff making oodles of money, lots of them are calling for, instead of getting a hard number, it's actually a percentage of the salary cap. So that as that cap goes up every year, their money goes up every year. That's something, they want. That's definitely converting it more to a player-first league in my mind. Which is, obviously they're players. They want more money. They want it to be that way, and it's kind of going that direction more like the NBA. I feel like where, we see massive contracts in the NBA that, from players that aren't. Not all of them are superstars, and they get money that most NFL players, aside from the very best, would really want, even great players. So I don't know. It's an interesting discussion. Everything I think we talked about. It's food for thought. We'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah. I think the big thing is just the NFL is the most intricate, complicated league that it's pretty resistant to change, just in the way it's set up and made.
Yeah. In the words of Dave from Hot Rod,
yes.
He who is resistant to change is destined to perish. So why don't you try opening up that mind of yours?
I don't like cherry. It upsets my stomach. Dude, I've like 3 times I wanted to say that quote while you and Parker were talking, but I didn't want to ruin the...
I was thinking about it too, and I was like, all right, this is the moment.
Yeah.
But I am Rico, my mind is resistant to change. I really, like, the NFL is at peak form right now, but it can only, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. So, it can't stay like this forever, which is tough. My only hope is it can only become more perfect from where it is now, and I hope that we keep seeing great NFL. I love this league so much.
Now,
I would see it ruin itself.
Absolutely, I totally agree. But one thing I want to, because you're right, if you don't change in certain ways and adapt, you lose. But I think lots of people, point to the NBA for all the things we've talked about with propping up players, expanding, making changes. Yet it's been well documented that their finals this year, for whatever reasons they might be, were not getting a lot of views. And the NFL regular season games were getting more watches than the NBA playoffs. So that's another side to this thing. You know, it's kind of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like the NFL is still the most popular league in this country. I think as a single league, it's the most earning league in the world. I want to say. I don't know. I'm always scared to say that because I don't know. I know there's crazy soccer leagues out there making who knows how much money. I don't know.
Well, honestly, the NFL does well even compared to the world and other sports. And one thing too, I think here's the thing. Obviously, the finals is weird. Where the finals just, I think they got what, like 5.8 million viewers. And
one of the games, yeah.
And I know it happened because the Seattle Seahawks played a game like the day of or the day after or something, and that got like 11.6 million views. But one thing is
the same day.
I think it was the same day. The NBA plays so many more games, and there's so much more, watch time of that league that each game just needs to get less views to still be super profitable. That makes sense. So I bet when you take the overall view time of those leagues, they're pretty similar because, there's 16 seasonal games for NFL. There's 72 for NBA. So I bet when you compare overall watch team for the whole season amongst the whole league, it's probably somewhat similar. But still, the fact is, way more people are just interested in watching a regular season football game than the NBA finals, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that really put it to the test, right? Okay, well, because the NBA finals were always in the summer, and there's no football on it, so that's all there is to watch. So now people have to make a choice, and they could either watch, LeBron James, the best basketball player in the league, or they could watch Russell Wilson struggle to beat Kirk Cousins in a Week 5 regular season game.
Say, I wasn't going to make any more Seahawks jokes. Austin did it. It wasn't me.
I mean, the Seahawks won, so people made their choice. People would rather watch the Seahawks than watch the Lakers, which is a more valuable team money wise than Seattle. But so I mean,
we could go into a real deep dive on the problems of the NBA, but we're a football podcast. We only bring it up to point out that the
NFL's better.
Like, the NFL's way better than the NBA. I hate to say it.